Thank you.
Good.
Actually, I would like to maybe after I show the presentation or Emre shows the presentations, um, we can ask some of the other people who are here that haven't talked to us yet, if they would tell us a little bit about themselves. But I want to start the presentation so that people can get to it and we can talk afterwards. So we had three great presenters at our first meeting, which was 12 hours ago. Well,
11.
11 hours ago. Yes. And it's on finding news articles that contain feedback. And I don't know where it starts, the recording starts, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. I'm just going to let you see it. So, Emre, would you play the We have three presenters, about 10 minutes each, and then we'll talk
Okay.
after all three.
So entire screen, share sound.
Okay, everybody can see? I
Yes.
hope. All right.
I'm talking
Well,
to
I'll
a
start
video.
out, first of all, by just quickly introducing myself again. As we're all retired, which is really unfortunate because all of this stuff is so important in classrooms. And I would love to see it getting into classrooms. I wish I had a classroom to try some of this stuff out with. So anyway, to begin, many of us are familiar with the use of connection circles and causal loop diagrams as a way to get students to visualize, right, cause and effect relationships within a system, to recognize what might first appear to be a linear chain to be something that is in fact part of a much larger, more complex circular kind of connection. But finding examples that we could use in a classroom that are both current and relevant to the students can really be time consuming. I've tried to do this when I was teaching. I tried to do it, and boy, to go and read through the newspapers and try to find them all really took a lot of time. So with the advent of AI, especially given its ability to search through text that's available on the internet, using an LLM can help to find current and relevant articles and save a huge amount of time for a teacher. I've played around with the idea, and I've found that AI can be extremely helpful so long as the instructions that you give to it are clear and complete. So this is why I've got the prompt as paramount here. And I've come up with 4 suggestions based on the work I've done that might be able to help generate a usable response to a query about articles that you want to use in your classes. So we'll go through them one at a time. I'll give some examples. And when we're finished, I'll assemble all the examples into a prompt. We'll feed it into an LLM and see what we get. So first, provide some context. Let the LLM know who you are, what you're hoping to do, why it's important to you. Giving that information to the AI provides a context for it to gather information, but it also can help clarify for the teacher what it is they're trying to accomplish with the class. So in this case, I've got, we're going to use the example of a middle school student teaching students who are about 13. They're doing civics and government, and they would like to find some current articles that deal with those ideas and that have feedback, show long and short-term behavior. So the LLM is going to run out into the internet and try to find all of this stuff. 2, be as specific as you can about what you want the LLM to do. In this case, I'm interested in current stories about the government, and I want them to show clear examples of feedback and the links between feedback and behavior. So you want to be very explicit about that as you put in the prompt. 3rd, if possible, be specific about the kinds of sources that you're looking for, right? I want articles that are from reputable sources. So I put in that word. I'm not sure exactly how the LLM will interpret that word, but I think it's important to say that you want reputable, vetted, well-vetted sources that you can use. And I've also put in the names of some people that I know have written, things I've read that are typically about government and contain feedback. And we put in Dana Meadows as well, because she's sort of the queen, reigning queen of all of this. Okay, and then finally, it's important to be as clear as you can be about the response that you want back. So, this would be, I think, up to the teacher a little bit. But in my case, what I wanted to know is I wanted to know the title and the source of the article, right? So I can go back and check it. I want to get a succinct description of the loops that are involved in the system that's being described in the article. I want the behaviors of those loops, and I would like to get a description of the system so that any background that's necessary to really understand what the loops are doing and where they are in the system would be clarified. And I'm also asking for a citation here and a web address, and reminding the LLM that it's working with 13-year-olds. So all of that stuff goes into effectively what would be a prompt. So here's the prompt. I just basically took all the slides and threw them all together. And I can take that prompt, copy it. I may have to, I'm not sure how I'm going to do. I don't think I can copy off of this slide. So I'm going to try going to the next slide here. But I can copy and I can send it to Chat GPT or to Gemini, whatever you want to choose as your LLM. So I'm going to try Chat GPT to begin. So if I click on that, we're going to use the free version. And let me just make sure. You can see that, correct? I hope. I'm going to copy the prompt, and I'm going to put it in here to ask anything. So here's my prompt. I'm a middle school teacher working with 13-year-olds. Make sure your response does all of this, and we'll submit it and see what we get back. And am I getting anything back? Oh, here we go. All right, so story number 1, the U.S. debt spiral, positive feedback loop. Title and source, U.S. fiscal folly could create big, beautiful debt spirals, from Reuters. It gives a description of the feedback loop. It gives you the behavior. There's a growth of debt. There's risk escalation, long-term instability. And I asked it for a diagram. It gives you a diagram of the loop. You kind of see it here. Right? It tells you that the plus sign indicates there's an increase in one variable, and more deficit, more debt, more interest payments, more deficit. Background and context for students was given. Okay, and look, it's even telling me why it's great for students. It connects government policy, taxes, spending, economic consequences, borrowing costs, etc. So in this case, I got 2. I only asked for 1, but I got another one, the wealth effect. Virtuous or vicious cycle. And you can see the same thing. It gives you a description, gives you behavior. These are all the things that I asked for. And then, well, we can keep going here. Connecting to Danella Meadows, I'm getting a lot. I think maybe, I don't know. I wonder if it remembers who I am, because I often ask about these things, but it gave me some classroom discussion suggestions and some other places I might go to look for things. So kind of amazing, right? I mean, you think about all of that. And then I don't want to take up too much more time because we have other people to speak. But if I took all of this that was given to me and I copy it and I put it into Stella, if I go to Stella online and I put it into the prompt, it will generate causal loop diagram based on this information. So you can imagine a teacher starting, to think about what they're going to do in class with the causal loop diagrams. They get all of this information from the AI. It's a current article, and they have an example of a causal loop diagram that might be created using Stella online, and start there. and decide what to do next with all of the students. So there's, and AI could help with that too, but I think that's for another time. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing there.
So I think your screen is black because there we go. Okay, so I'm Kim Cassens, and my collaborator is here as well, who's Thomas F. Shipley, known as Tim. And all the work I'll be talking about today is a result of a virtuous cycle collaboration between the two of us, in which Tim's ideas coming out of social sciences as an observer of the human mind, and my ideas coming out of geosciences and education research as an observer of the earth are complementing each other and helping us to do things we couldn't do by ourselves. So Tim is here as well. So I'm going to pick up on something that arose during the October 31st education SIG, where there was discussion about two different kinds or bins of things that our group collectively wanted to be able to teach. So one was teaching students to make systems dynamics models, and the other was teaching students to use system dynamics models. And the important point was made that these are different populations, they have different backgrounds, they have different career aspirations, and they need different lessons and different kinds of pedagogy. And I agree with all of that. But I spoke up and said, there's another bin that hasn't been mentioned that I think is really important, and that is teaching people to use systems thinking in the real world. That's where I'm going to focus my comments today. And these two bins, the blue bins and the green bin, differ in important ways. So at the education SIG, we talked about these two bins of teaching people to make system dynamics models and use system dynamics models. And my talk today is about a different form of teaching people to use system thinking in the real world. And these bins differ in important ways. So the blue bins are in the computer. The thinking is done in the context of the model in the computer, whereas the bin I'm talking about today is the thinking takes place, out there in the real world. And in some ways, we're using the newspaper article as a proxy for what's going on, the kind of thinking one does out there in the real world. So in the two bins on the left, the students are dealing with things that are intentionally designed as to illuminate systems, whereas in the real world, you're typically dealing with things that were not intentionally designed as systems or to illuminate systems, or with the feedback loops being intentionally designed. So why do Tim and I think that this is really important to learn? And moreover, why do we even think that this is possible to teach, this kind of thinking, this kind of real world thinking? It's partly because of our background. So my undergraduate degree was in geology, and so my early education included a lot of this kind of pedagogy that involves students going out under the guidance of a professor and looking at the real world and learning how to make methodical observations in the real world, learning how to make inferences about what those observations, observing patterns and trends, and learning to make inferences about what the patterns and trends mean, and then learning to make causal interpretations about what caused the world to be the way it is. So I'd had this as part of my education. And for Tim, it's been part of his research agenda. He is an expert in understanding what geology experts do in the field, how they think, what they look at, what they attend to, how they make their interpretations and their inferences. So this group of students in these pictures are from a project called Learning to Observe, Unpacking the Development of Science Teachers' Observational Expertise in Field Settings. So this is all about researching how people learn to observe and make inferences and then causal interpretations from their observations. And this is the kind of thing that they do at the end of their week of observations. They systematize their descriptions, they make inferences about what that means, and then they make causal interpretations of why it happens. So we believe that this kind of teaching is important and it's doable. But it's very hard. So this kind of making observations and interpretations in the real world of real world systems is hard because the real world is not designed to be educative. It's much more complex than most school lessons. it's not obvious in the real world what to pay attention to. A lot of the stuff you care about is actually missing. The evidence is missing. And a lot of what you can see is irrelevant to the system story you're trying to put together. The processes are usually too slow to be observed. They have to be inferred. And actually, once you get out into the field, even the most expert professor doesn't have all the answers. And the students immediately confront the boundary between the known and the unknown, just like scientists do. So now, carrying this idea from field geology over to systems thinking, we can't actually take students out into the world and have them observe supply and demand cycles or escalation of hostilities or even predator-prey systems or the kinds of loops that Steve talked about in his last talk. So instead, we're finding it's useful to use well-done journalism as a kind of a real-world proxy, as a way to bring the complexity of the real world into the classroom or to the awareness of people in an informal science education setting. So it's pedagogically efficient. There's a manageable time investment. All the students are working from the same stimulus, so they're not all working from different things. It's not expensive. But if you have a good journalist, the complexity of the real world is manifest. And the description is rich and complex. And somewhere within all that verbiage, there's a feedback loop buried if you've selected the article appropriately. The system relevant information is there if you've selected a good article, but it's typically scattered out of order, and some is thinking, just as though you were coming across it in the real world, but the journalist has done the observing on your behalf. So this is hard, but it's possible. It's realistic, but doable. In a good article, students confront the boundary between the known and the unknown because this is breaking news. And so the end of the story is not known. So you are at the boundary between the known and the unknown. And a good journalist is likely to have offered some clues about process. So when it comes to thinking about process, the student is not starting from, a blank sheet of paper. They've got some clues to build from. So we've done this in two different contexts. The first is a formal, I'll show two examples. One is a formal lesson that we developed, Tim and I and several other colleagues, in the context of an NSF-funded project on improving undergraduate science education. And then the second example will be from our Substack. So the formal lesson example, this is published on the Teach the Earth website, and it's called Find the Feedback Loop. The link is at the bottom of the page. So the way this starts is that students are first taught about feedback loops. We've used this in several different instructional work. The first thing that they do is they read a reading passage taken from the popular media and mark the clues in the article that make them think that this is where there's a feedback loop. So we have a collection of suitable articles. This one that happens to be here is from a book for a popular audience about aging, strength and muscle mass as you age. And then after that, they sketch a causal loop diagram that depicts the feedback loop. We found that it's important to have them write a narrative that describes how the loop works. Otherwise, otherwise you can't always tell what the students were actually thinking, and you can easily deceive yourself into thinking they know more than they do. So we specify that the narrative should start at one node, progress methodically all the way around the node, and the narrative should discuss the net effect of the loop taken as a whole on the larger system within which the loop is embedded, because that's why we care about it in our content domain course as opposed to a systems dynamics course. So here's an example of a kind of a medium quality answer to this particular prompt. They've picked up some important relationships that were in the article, but they've also missed a lot, and their narrative is pretty sketchy and doesn't get at the net effect of the loop taken as a whole. So we've developed two things: a detailed rubric. So this is the rubric without the descriptions filled in, and also a simpler 10-item checklist so that an instructor can use this, a researcher can use it to evaluate student products, or a teacher can use it to provide guidance to their students. So that's the lesson example. And the other example is from our Substack. So we started this Substack in the early summer. It's called Loops Behind the News. So it's all about feedback loops in the news. And I'm excited to be able to use some of Steve's examples or find examples through Steve and Alan's techniques. So anyway, Loops Behind the News. The example that I'm going to show you was kicked off when we got an email from an editor of St. Louis Magazine. He said, our city recently did away with alleyway recycling bins because contamination was too high. I'm trying to figure out why this failed. He had two ideas. A is people who don't care about complying, or B, people who made a good faith mistake, but didn't get it right. So my hypothesis is that the system didn't work because there was no feedback loop for people who use the bins. In contrast, in other cities, it does work, especially if the households were notified by the municipality of the mistakes. So he wrote to us and said, I think this is about feedback loops. Can you help me, figure this out? So we made up a causal loop diagram and sent it off to him. We put two balancing loops, each to attend to one of the two categories of people he had identified. So people who actually were just making a mistake, they lacked knowledge. So we gave them a balancing feedback loop where notification of their mistaken behavior would give them more knowledge. So therefore they would recycle more correctly. For the people who just didn't care, we suggested that awareness of community norms might come out of a notification as well. So we sent this off to him and we didn't hear, but eventually he published his article. And then we picked up on his article and this whole sort of set of circumstances and wrote about it on our Substack at this address that's at the bottom. And then we took the opportunity to go further and I talk about another really important idea in systems thinking. We picked up on this widespread symbol called the chasing arrow symbol, which is used to indicate recycling. And we said, okay, is this chasing arrow thing a causal loop diagram? We said, no, it's not, because these are not arrows indicating causal influence. These are arrows indicating flows of material. So if they're flows of material, what is the material? And so we redrew the chasing arrows diagram with specifying what the materials are between the arrows. Materials input into manufacturing flows into materials in manufactured products, flows into materials in the recycling stream, flows into materials input into manufacturing. And once we had done this, it became really obvious that this chasing arrow symbol leaves out very important parts of the story, and in fact is kind of misleading in its connotation that it's a closed circle like that. So we added to our new diagram materials extracted from nature as an input, and every one of these steps has an output to waste, so that in fact the recycling process is much less efficient than one might infer from that symbol alone. So anyway, we have a bunch of these now, and we've got a bunch more in mind. And if you want to hear more of our ideas, here's how to access our Substack and also the website that contains the educational materials that we created for our IUS project. So thank you.
Yeah, so I also have a Substack blog, and there you see my address, and anyone who wants to write to me, it's just my last name at Gmail as well, if there's any questions. So let's see if we go through. I took a little bit different approach in that I think that most news articles do have feedback. I remember once either reading or hearing when I heard a talk by Jake Forrester that when you learn systems thinking and system dynamics, you read the newspaper differently. And so we tend to see the feedback everywhere. So I was interested in doing, in my last blog, I did something about electricity prices. And this behavior over time graph here, to start with, just shows some of the southern states in the United States. And many of the states have different prices for electricity. And these are the per kilowatt hour price. And so I was wondering why that is, and like Kim, I came upon an article from the New York Times, which is usually my first source of information about electricity. So I thought, well, how would I approach this with students? And the first thing would be maybe to just start with a really quick stock flow diagram. And I'm thinking of either middle school or even younger students. Just a simple diagram there to show that there's a certain amount of electrical energy that's available on to consumers. Electricity has to be generated, and it's used. And very simple start, get people going. These are the connection circle rules. Now, again, in my blog, I mentioned that we call them rules. I could use the air quotes here, rules, because it was for students. But, it's actually a tool, if you're unfamiliar with it, that is a kind of a brainstorming tool. When you take an article or a problem that you're working on, draw a circle and then follow these quick rules. Choose things that contribute to the problem, call them nouns, and they either increase or decrease. Try to limit them so you don't get a plate of spaghetti and you can't really deal with it. You want to have only 5 to 10, if you can help it. And the elements cause the other elements, and you call them variables or elements, to increase or decrease when they change. And then finally, look for feedback loops. And my colleagues and I always felt that the connection circles were a stepping stone to causal loop diagrams. So here's one that I started about electricity costs and why electricity costs are different. Now these ones on the top, up here around the top of the circle, are things that I found in the article that talk about why the generators, the utilities have to pay more. They have to pay, and I'll go from like 1 o'clock on the clock back. They have to pay dividends. Wildfires in California have raised prices a lot because they have to either bury the wires or make them safer. There's always modernization of infrastructure to be done. Just plain old inflation is raising prices, and then demand from the AI center, which Steve is helping to fuel there. That's more and more electricity being needed. Then down around the bottom, there's cost to consumers. I use the word anger. I explain this again in my blog. That's kind of a strong word. I could have used concern, but I wanted something that was more a motivator to action, since my blog is called Now What, and kind of tries to give people hope and ideas for action. And then the last two elements that I added down here, wind and solar installations have often been cited in articles that I read as lowering the costs of electricity generation. There's usually a fairly big upfront cost, but often that's undertaken by the construction companies, and they contract with the electrical companies. And then once you're on wind and solar, you're getting the Earth's energy. And finally, down here, government support for renewable energy. All of those, us in the United States, are certainly aware that our federal government is working to depress the institutions of those right now. So what happened was, when I drew the connections, I ended up with what the late Barry Richmond, a pioneer in system dynamics and systems thinking, would call a dead buffalo. And that's linear thinking, where you have all these causes and they go into one effect. So if you're thinking, okay, why are the costs rising for utility companies? And I connected all those ones that I talked about in the last slide. And it resembled to Barry. I liked his analogy. It was like a buffalo being succumbing to the arrows of hunters. Then down at the bottom, I had some connecting arrows, but I didn't have a closed loop, so I knew that I had more work to do. One of the things that I don't mind having mistakes like this is that when I first started mentoring others to help them in schools, I found that a lot of teachers would just want to get into a systems activity and be kind of one and done. They would have kids write and do drafts. If they were doing math problems. They might have kids come up with a solution and then have to keep trying to hone the solution. So I think systems the same way. It's an iterative process. Those of us who use it know that. But it's important for beginners to know that, you know, your first attempts are often going to be not something that you're saying, well, that really worked well. So I added some things down at the bottom, and I used dashed connectors to show that they were mental models of mine. These did not come from the article. And again, since my bias in a way right now is to connect environmental systems with economic prosperity and social justice and sustainability, these are kind of hopeful things that I thought of. That as the customers were paying more, there's a lot of anger, and the articles often talked about people who were really having difficulty paying their bills and doing other things in their life. So that if we could raise the consciousness, let more people know that renewable energy is one of the ways we can have more and less expensive electrical energy, that might put some pressure on governments and make the government support for renewable energy increase. That's a huge if, not happening in the United States right now so well, but I'm hopeful, so there are mine. Then I took a marker and traced it so I could see where my feedback loop was. And I said to myself and my readers on the blog, I'll get back to the dead buffalo in a while. So I pulled out that loop and using Stella, I drew a neater looking one. And there's my loop that I talked about. That as costs increased, anger would go up or concern. We hope citizens would call for renewable energy. As a matter of fact, last Tuesday night, I saw a local webinar about offshore wind here in Massachusetts and how it's still going forward and the fact that it's going to be very helpful. So government support for renewable energy could come with more pressure. Wind and solar would come online, and then the costs would go down. So kind of hopeful. Now, I wanted to fix the dead buffalo, so I did two things. I aggregated variables that were similar. So I took all the costs to utilities from my other connection circle, and titled it Aggregated Costs to Utilities, and just left it there. And then I added some new variables, which you can see here. I won't read them all, but again, I went back to the articles and was looking at in the Times, and then I also did a web search and read some other stuff about how rates are actually set and why they're different. And I learned that rates are set by regulators in various states. So the utility doesn't just say to the consumer, here's what your electricity rate is, like it or leave it, because we can't go generally to other providers. So I put that one in. So now I was happier with my connection circle, and I followed a rule that I have that every element around the circle should have an arrow going in and also an arrow coming out. And so I satisfied that criterion at that point. Took my markers and I traced them around, and I ended up finding 3 of the loops. And then again, using Stella, I pulled them out so they'd be a little nicer looking. Forgot to take the box away from one of the balancing loop symbols, but there's where I ended up with my different ones, different loops. And again, conservation measures, again, that's a little bit sugar coating it. A lot of times consumers can't pay their electric bill, so they don't use as much electricity, turn down their heat or their air conditioning turned up, skimp on other things, whatever it is, but somehow try to bring their costs down. So somehow, rate increases sought by the utility end up at the regulators, and then that gets to the consumers. And so since I had cost to consumers in my other one, my other loop that I pulled out, I could make one big loop with cost to consumers there, and there's a lot of feedback. Everything's connected, and as we know, those of us who are used to feedback loops, we know that if we were to change anything in the feedback loop, it would change the whole loop. So there's a lot of different places here. When I ask now what, different people are taking different approaches to try to either get the government to do renewables, to try to make the utilities rate increases be lower. You can vote in some states for the regulators, or there are other political ways that you can put some pressure on the regulators. I was reading in one article that many of the electric companies are paying a dividend of about 12%, and some experts say, they should really be only collecting 6% at the most. So there's all kinds of things that I learned from doing this. And I think, kids thinking about electricity, that even if they're middle school, their parents are probably always telling them turn off lights and turn things off when you're not using them, and so on. And they're wondering why maybe we're having so much trouble getting wind and solar installations. So I think that's it. I'm going to stop the share, and that's the end of my process there of taking one idea, electricity prices, looking up some nice articles, some articles that I liked, and going through the process of finding feedback in them.
Before we start our conversation, I'd like to let you know that Kim Castens has come online. She was the second speaker at our presentation. You saw her present about loops in the news. And it's midnight for her where she is, or actually after midnight. So we're very, very fortunate that she decided to stay up and be available. If you have any questions for her, I would hope that you would ask them, because the other two speakers were also on the East Coast of the United States, but they decided not to come at this late time for them. We almost never get anyone to come at this time for this meeting from the eastern part of the United States. So if you would like to ask her about her blog, she's done a lot of work with feedback and study on feedback. And as she's a retired professor from Columbia and geologist, she did introduce herself when she presented. So if you have any questions for her, please feel free to ask her. Otherwise, I will just open it up for any kind of comments or questions. Okay, Kim, good. You can start this.
So this is entertaining to do this in the middle of the night. I'm really glad I didn't have to give the talk in the middle of the night, but I'm interested to be here. But I actually had a question about Alan's presentation, and I know he's not here, but maybe somebody else has also been thinking along these same lines. And I'm sorry I didn't think of it this morning. But the behavior over time graph that he began with, which was the newspaper-based stimulus that he started from, um, showed a whole bunch of states in the southern United States, all with electricity prices growing over time. But the causal loop diagram that he ended with had all balancing feedback loops. It didn't have anything driving that observation that started the entire conversation. So I think that's problematic to, start with an observation. Well, of course, as you saw, my talk was all about thinking about the real world. And so that particular conversation did not return. It began in the real world with, okay, electricity prices is going up, up, up everywhere, that we looked at in this graph. But then it didn't return to the real world at the end. So I feel like that's problematic. And also, there was actually one loop in his final diagram that was advertised that was labeled as a reinforcing feedback loop, but it was a loop that earlier in the conversation was called a balancing loop. So it was the loop that went from cost to consumer anger, to government support for renewable energy, to wind and solar installation, and then back from wind and solar to cost to consumer. And on the final diagram, it shows that as a plus, making it a reinforcing loop. But earlier in the conversation, when he was still at the circle, that final link was shown as the minus. So it would have been another balancing loop. So anyway,
Right.
so my main point is just that, having gone from the real world to the model, I think it's really important to return to the real world and say, okay, does the model match the real world, at least conceptually? And I don't know why I managed to listen to that conversation this morning without making this comment, but I just want to make this comment again, that all this thinking about systems has to be solidly grounded, both at the beginning and at the end, in the real world. And getting too caught up in the marvels of the model can actually distract you from thinking about the real world. So I'll either write to Alan directly or put a comment in the Substack. But anyway, I just wanted to speak up again for connecting to the real world.
I think that's an excellent point, and I think that part of the issue is this whole particular approach is really new and fairly difficult for teachers. And it's easy to get lost in just the ability to do the middle stuff.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that he started with some kind of behavior over time graph
From the real world, not an imaginary one.
from the real world. But I think the point that you bring up is excellent, that in the modeling process, we have to check continually, are we still connected? Because, I mean, that's the point, is to try to represent what we are, at least what we think we are seeing in the real world. And I'm sure he would appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, I
So,
will. I'll get in touch with him. But he
yeah.
did say some relevant things.
Can I just,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, can I ask a clarification question, which is, I can't see the graph. Sorry, this is Shane Gary. I'm dialing in, but I'm driving, so I can't see the graph. Was the graph showing exponential growth on the price increase or not? Because you can get increases in behavior, in dynamic behavior, without reinforcing feedback. You can't get exponential growth, but you can get increases in dynamic behavior for sure.
So I did not grab a copy of the graph. My memory is a whole bunch of colored lines, rising inexorably, some faster than others. Okay, there we are.
It doesn't really look exponential to me.
No, I would agree. It doesn't look exponential. Nonetheless, to tell students that we're developing a model that explains this real world behavior, and have nothing in the model that would drive towards up, seems to me to not be doing a service to the kids.
Yes, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, sure. Do the kids, do they ask questions about what their behavior is related to, how their behavior should be related to this data? So they'll see that it's rising up, and would it be, oh, I have to turn off the lights, or I have to set up a solar, or anything like that? Or are they just looking at the I mean, it's really important data, but they're looking to make the loops and connections and of the system. So I don't know if there's a connection for them to make personally with the data. I don't know. Did you find that?
I don't know if I can speak for Alan. I do know that in the first book that he and Rob Quaden wrote, that is called The Shape of Change, which is an excellent book, that he has a lot of questions. That there are 8 or 10 chapters in that book, and each one is on a lesson, not from the news, just a lesson what we're dealing with. And they have in there some excellent questions that they ask students to help them bring the activity back to their mental models. And does this make sense? I would be surprised if he didn't try to do that, but more than that, I can't really give you an explanation because he's not here, and I wouldn't know for sure.
Appreciate it. Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah.
I'll look that up.
And another explanation might be uh, we cannot, that's the problem with the feedback loops. We cannot see the delay in the feedback loops. Any balancing, it doesn't give that a balancing loop just gives a straight line. Balancing loop with a delay can oscillate, or depending on the starting position, it can just converge to some number. So maybe what Ellen was trying to explain was, if we get angry enough and support or not support the administration, we can change this.
Mhm.
So this, now that the balancing loop hasn't started, so but that's why it is increasing, or whenever it increases high enough, the balancing behavior we will see. But if we can get angry enough, maybe.
Yeah, he did say that. He did say, and so this effort is giving me reason for hope that,
Yeah.
that basically we could rein this in.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with that there's reason for hope, and these balancing loops give reason for hope. Nonetheless, the failure of the model to explain the observations is at least troubling, and doesn't really tell students what the relationship between observations and models should be. I mean, there should be an iterative model. You start with some observations, you make a model, you look to see if the model agrees with the observations, and if the model doesn't agree with the observations, then that should be a topic of conversation. But and we never got to that part of the conversation of saying, well,
You had to come
this
back.
model is actually not explaining our observations. Maybe that's because the model is a hypothetical about the future,
Yeah.
about things
Yeah.
would be happening. But what do we do with the fact that we have this inexorably growing, the experiment's been done, and I think there were 6 different states. The experiment's been done in 6 different states, and every one of those 6 states yielded the same answer. The prices go up, 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 up. So it's not an anomalous data point that you happen to look at a weird state. So there's something there that needs to be explained. We haven't yet come up with an explanation, so more thinking is needed.
So I would have to say that this is a good reason why you create simulation models, because it's much more obvious
Yeah.
if you're running your model and it's not showing you the behavior you anticipate, that you better go back and look at what you developed. So that's a part of an argument. But the feedback loops are a really important tool, and using it to help us visualize the really important connections in a story has a lot of value. And I always like, Kim, when you are attending our meetings, that you always bring up something that makes us think hard about what we might be missing. And I wish that Al were here
So do I.
because he
Yeah.
was a middle school teacher, science teacher, so very successful science teacher. And I am sure that he either could give a thoughtful response or say, you're right, that was missing from this explanation, and it should be added.
I'll write to him. I'm sorry I didn't
Yes,
think of it this
and
way.
I think he would appreciate that.
Okay.
Another thing
So,
is, I think the power of these tools are that make this visual, and we can
yes,
just now see the mental model of Alan without him. And if instead he wrote it in a text, and it is very easy to hide behind the words, and because words might have multiple
right,
meanings or sentences. But in our case, we can just see what he really thought and criticize it. And this is another powerful way of looking at
right.
events. We are not seeking the ultimate truth, but the perspectives, maybe.
Yeah. Especially when we're dealing with students where it's so hard to know what their mental model is.
Right.
Yes,
Have them
definitely so.
externalize their mental model and put it out there where we as teachers can see it is incredibly valuable.
So that came up in your presentation. And I think that's a place a lot of teachers kind of short circuit the system. Okay, so the student has drawn a feedback loop. Do
That's
they
right.
really know what it's telling them?
That's right. Yep.
And so they need to write explanations because you think, oh, well, they drew a good feedback loop. I can interpret it in my own way, but what is the student actually thinking about how they drew it? And so I really liked in your presentation when you showed that example from a student and you said, well, it wasn't a bad start, but it really was not, it did not show very deep thinking on the part of the student. It's easy to short circuit the process.
It's easy to assume,
And
oh, they must have understood it. They just didn't use the right word. Well, possibly, or possibly they really didn't understand it.
right, right. So, but I think having the tools to visualize what the person is thinking gets us a significant step forward than just using words. Um, I think because it forces the student to lay out their mental model, to lay it out for analysis. So then people can ask questions about, well, and exactly what you did, Kim, with Al's. You had some things, that didn't make sense to you. And Al, I'm sure, would be very happy to try to explain what he was thinking at the time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll also read his Substack article. I started to read it, but I didn't have this question in mind at the time. So it may
Yeah.
be that in the longer exposition, he's already dealt with this. But
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
read his Substack post and then I'll write to him. So
Yeah. Yeah. But it's great to have these blogs because it's such a great resource for teachers.
So
Because
I just have one practical
ahead.
question, which is I'd love to be able to watch the video of this since I joined while I was driving. Is the video
Yes,
that
it's
you just played,
posted.
is that going to be available? Okay,
It is.
terrific.
We always,
Wonderful.
all of our webinars and all of our SIG meetings where we have presenters are always recorded and they're posted on our System Dynamics Society pre-college webpage. And so it's on the very first page. We have like about 6 pages on our pre-college web mini site on the System Dynamics Society website. But this is on the first page. And this was a SIG meeting, which means our presenters had very short amount of time to talk. And the whole point was to have them stimulate conversation. So we would have more of our time for conversation. When we have webinars, we don't have very much time for conversation. So the webinars are shown first, and they're easy to identify. But if you go under the webinars, then it says SIG meetings, and there's just the title. So this one would say finding news articles containing feedback. And if you click on that link, then you can see the recording and you can watch it.
Terrific. Terrific. Thank you. I
You're
really
welcome.
enjoyed the session. Thank you to the presenters, and Kim, thank you for joining at midnight and after.
Yes,
Sure.
thank you.
Sorry, I also have two comments
Okay.
about the last presentation. Can I share with you?
Sure. The last such presentation was by Al Tukotsky.
Uh, in the slide, they explained that the students have to select 5 to 10 variable. I
Right.
think it's usually isn't feasible because you ask your student to define the boundary and limit the number of the variables, but they aren't at the level that can decide which variable should be in the model and which should be excluded. So I think isn't very practical, especially for the novice modelers. And the other things is about the did Buffalo. Uh, Honestly, I have a master in system dynamics, but before this presentation, I uh, haven't seen this diagram. I just see somewhere else and try to use that. I found it very difficult. Maybe it was initial idea to learn to teach system dynamics, but I think the next version, a spaghetti diagram, is more helpful because even I have as I mentioned, master in system dynamics, it was difficult for me to use, and it was much easier to draw a spaghetti diagram. And I think maybe it's easier for students for novice also to find the variables and just try to find the connection between them. And then just for example, in Vensim, try to change the layout of the variable to minimize the cross lines and then try to find the loops.
So if I understand, you're saying that you find connection circles not an easy approach, right? You find it kind of confusing and that you prefer stock flow diagrams?
No, I'm just I have two critiques to the method to finding the loops for in the third presentation. I think the first critique is that limiting the number of the variables to between 5 to 10 isn't a good idea, especially for the novice modelers, because they aren't at the level to decide which variable should be in the model or should be out of the boundary. The
More than
second,
10 or less than 5?
between 5 and 10.
Are you saying that's too many or that's too few?
I believe that we shouldn't limit the students about the number of the variables because they can we put another pressure on the student to decide which variable should be in the model or shouldn't be in the model, and they aren't at that level to decide which variable should be or should be excluded. So I think we just ask them to find the variables, to find the noun and noun phrases, put on the paper, and then try to find the connection between the variables based on the text, based on the explanation, And instead of and the second of my second objection is about the deep buffalo diagram. I think isn't very useful. I think it's much easier and much better to use the spaghetti diagram. Just write the name of the variables, all of the variables, and then try to find the connection between those variables based on the text. And if any variables have no connection, definitely it will be excluded from the model and will be out of the boundary of the model, and the rest will be in the model. And I think it's much easier for the students to understand.
So I think the reason he said between 5 and 10, first of all, most of the variables are stock variables. They're nouns, not flow variables. They're stock variables. And there should not be very many stock variables in a story for a novice person trying to do this. But he said if you do more than 10, it starts to look like spaghetti, and it's very, very hard to identify the feedback. So I think I would
Maybe
have to
this,
agree with him to say you want to find stories for novices
yeah,
that
sorry.
don't have so many variables in them
Yeah,
that
I
they would
think
feel they
the
would have to
solution
get.
is to give them a simple text to them
Right.
instead of asking them to select only 5 to 10 variables. If For example, if I'm a novice and the text have I don't know, more than 20 variable noun and noun phrases, it will be a challenge for me to decide uh, how can I select 5 between these 20 variables. It should be a kind of random or
So I think that a newspaper article is probably not the first thing you would want to use when teaching students to use connection circles. You would probably want to have, and in his book, The Shape of Change, he has a children's story that he uses as an example. It's a great story, and it's a predator prey, essentially a story from a children's book, and so it works really well. And you would want to do that with a not with a group of children, and the very first time they're doing this in, say, a middle school classroom. News articles would be a little tough to start with making a connection circle, because you're right, there can be too many variables to be able to help them get started on the technique. So I think there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes when you're helping a student learn to use that tool to identify feedback. Um, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Um, anything else that anyone would like to bring up about um, the articles, or ask Kim since she's here? Already it's 1 o'clock for you. Um, anything else? Welcome, Alan. We're glad to see you. He's one of our regulars at this meeting. We have this meeting every week, and we just talk about things that we are going to try to do um, every week. What our group would like to try to put on. We will not have a meeting um, we will not have any meeting or webinar in December. And in January, we have a very nice presentation by Emre and Sena Digirmensi, who was a middle school science teacher and is now working on a PhD. And they will talk about setting up a template to help create lessons where AI helps align national standards with the systems thinking activities that are going on in the lesson. Anyway, I don't know all the details, but I'm excited to see that. And I'd like to remind you that in March, it'll be the third week or the fourth week of March on a Saturday, we will have our symposium again, 5-hour symposium that is on systems thinking, and we will have 4 strands: kindergarten and primary school, middle school, high school, and university research. And it will start on the East Coast of the United States. It will start at 7 in the morning and run for 5 hours, all the way to Turkey, where it will start at 5 p.m. and end at 10 p.m. And it will be live, and we will have quite a few presenters. So it's the second time that we have done this. We did it last year in March. I hope that you will think about participating in that when we have it in March. So is there anything else? I know it's getting late, so I hate to keep you, but I would like to know if you want to introduce yourself. Would you like to tell us what you do if this is your first time here? Anyone? Shanti?
Yes. Well, I don't know. Am I late or because I noticed it start 1 o'clock at my time? Is it at the end of meeting or it's just started?
It's at the end of the meeting.
Oh, okay. I think I miss the time zone converter because I thought it's like start 1 o'clock. It's why I'm coming at 1 o'clock. Okay. I
Is this
just
1 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon?
in the afternoon.
In the afternoon. It's
Yes.
so when the United States shifted,
Yes.
um,
Oh, the time, yeah, saving, yeah. I
but
think I
it
missed,
should say in the advertisement,
yeah.
Emre puts some different countries so um, you can
Okay,
see some relative time zones, I'm hoping,
yeah.
that will help you.
But we are
Okay,
recording, so
We are recording, so we have it recorded. So you could go to our System Dynamics Society pre-college webpage.
okay.
And is that, Emre, can you put in the chat, can you put I don't, there it is. He also has there it is. In the chat is
Yes.
the link for our web page, and you
Okay.
want to go to the SIG meetings, not the webinars, but to the SIG
Yes.
meeting. This will be listed in the SIG meeting. And then if you click on the title, which is Finding News Articles Containing Feedback, if you click on that, it will show you the recording and you can watch it.
Okay, thank
Okay?
you.
All right.
Yeah, I just introduced myself a bit probably because I live in Jakarta, Indonesia. So yeah, it's 12 hours different means from your time. So
Right.
yeah,
Are you a teacher or a researcher?
Not actually like a teacher in the formal school, but I'm using system thinking to learning with the youth around
What
12,
what age?
about junior high school, 12 to 17.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and yeah, well, I got the book like The Shape of Change actually during COVID pandemic, and we try to explain about the pandemic with one of the lesson from that book, and we play it online. We modify the instruction somehow to play it online so yeah, the youth can understand when they have to stay at home because at the beginning of the pandemic, mostly like people doesn't really uh understand what happened. Yeah, it is, but after they play and the student write the testimony that they know why they have to stay at home at that time. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
great.
I just come to the meeting because I want to learn others' activities and get inspiration from the group. Yeah.
Well, I hope you will come to our symposium because we will have a whole bunch of resources that we will share with people as well. So I hope you will think about doing that in March.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you
Uh,
very much.
If you have ideas, if anyone has ideas they would like to have us discuss or talk about, please let us know. And that we could perhaps set up some other meetings for, over topics that people would like us to discuss or present on. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think that's enough. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you very much.
Above and beyond the call of duty. Thank you very much for
Thank you,
attending
Emery. Thank you,
at
Diana.
this late time.
Yep.
And we will see you all another time, I hope.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Nice
Bye.
to meet you even on the short time.
Yeah,
Thank
yes, yeah. Nice to meet
Okay.
you, Shanti.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to
Bye.
meet you.
And
Bye bye.
Bye.
bye, Lena. Bye, everybody.
Bye.